Greetings, South Georgia Fig family. A line unleashed back at you from right here at South Georgia Figs, right here in Grove Zone 8B in Tifton, Georgia. In today's video, I'm super excited to be bringing you guys along with me as we begin the process of potting about a dozen of the 70 fig tree cuttings that we attempted to propagate here about 3 weeks ago. Now we have several fig tree cuttings that are fully propagated and rooted at this time. And we're going to go ahead and get those fig tree cuttings in some soil. I'm going to take this moment to show you guys what fig tree cuttings we have that are ready to be potted up, and what tell you guys what varieties we have, and show you guys the potting mix that we're going to be using to temporarily pot these cuttings in tiny little 4-inch containers for about the next maybe 2.5 weeks before we transplant those uh, rooted fig trees again into 1-gallon containers. Here in this first tiny little teacup container, you guys, we have some Smith fig tree cuttings. You guys can see that name down there. I have about 3 Smith fig tree cuttings in this little tiny teacup. I think about two of those 3 fig tree cuttings have roots on them. Once we begin to pot up our fig trees, we'll pull each one of these cuttings out, and the ones that are ready to be potted, we'll go ahead and pop those, and the ones that's not fully propagated, we'll leave those in the containers for another time. Here in this second container, we have some Peter's honey fig tree cuttings, and we also have some Columbaro fig tree cuttings in this container. And you guys peek down in there. I'm not sure if this camera's picking that up. Do you guys see those roots down there? We have a gang of roots down there. Not sure if any of these fig tree cuttings are actually ready to go in soil or not, but once we pour those out, we'll again check the cuttings. If they're ready to be potted, we'll pot those. If they're not, we'll place them back in these containers for another week or so. Here in this container, if I'm not mistaken, we have our Yolo figs. I think, yes, these are Yolo figs in this container. As I lift this container up, you guys can see that this is a jelly jar that we, so just a regular jelly jar from the grocery store that we used to propagate these fig tree cuttings in. But as you guys can see, when you look down in there, we have a gang of roots going on all 3 of the fig tree cuttings here in this container. So we'll definitely be potting up all 3 of our Yolo fig tree cuttings at this time. And here in this last 2-gallon container, we have a total of 18 to 20 Verdon strawberry fig tree cuttings in here, and the majority of these fig tree cuttings were already sprouting roots when we put these fig tree cuttings in this container to begin the propagation process. Again, all of these fig tree cuttings that you see here have been in our refrigerator, well wrapped, well stored properly in vacuum sealed containers for the past 2 years at least. Some of these cuttings may be more than 2 years old, but when it comes to fig tree cuttings, when properly stored, fig tree cuttings will store at least up to 2 years. You can take them out of your refrigerator, take them out of your bags, and they will, as you can see in these containers, propagate for you guys. Again, we have about 18 to 20 Verdon strawberry fig tree cuttings in these containers, and we're going to put these in those tiny containers over there also. They're kind of tall to go in those containers, but we're going to put these in, all of our cuttings in these little tiny containers over here for about the next week and a half to 2 weeks before we transplant them again into 1-gallon containers. We're going to start with, let's see here. Let's start with our Yolo figs in this video. I'm going to get this container down here in this bucket down here. Now what we have down here in this bucket, what we have here is a failure to communicate. Not really. What we have in this bucket here, guys, is actually filtered ground soil from in the very, very back of our food forest back there behind our koi and goldfish pond that you guys can't see behind our greenhouse at this point, but that is actually filtered ground soil from back there. We're going to use this filtered ground soil to plant all of our cuttings in today. I have my trusty tripod set up here, and I have it set up in a position where it's pretty much in line with this bucket here. So I'm going to place my camera on this tripod at this time. And get in here. See if I can bring you guys in a little bit closer than what I currently have here. Give you guys as up close a view of what's going on down here as I pot these fig tree cutters as I possibly can. All right. I'm gonna slide my trusty 85-year-old rocker up close to that bucket there. I'm gonna grab a couple of our 4-inch containers here. Go ahead and just some soil in these containers. I'm gonna pull these fig tree cuttings out of this little bucket here, this little jar here, and show you guys what the roots look like on each individual cutting. We'll get these 3 cuttings potted up, and we won't bore you guys for the entire process of potting all of our cuttings. But we will break back towards the end of this video and show you guys what the roots look like on our Verdon strawberry fig tree cuttings, because we're expecting some tremendous root systems to have developed on those fig tree cuttings during the last 3 weeks. I think it's been about 3 weeks since we began this propagation experiment here. At any rate, let's go ahead and get a little soil in this container. Again, these are little 4-inch containers, so we won't put a whole bunch of soil down in the bottom of our containers. It's enough to cover that bottom. Not sure if you guys can see that on the camera, but we're not putting a tremendous amount of soil in our container. At this point, we're going to pull each individual fig tree cutting from this container. Immature fig tree roots, for most of you guys who don't know, immature fig tree roots, the little bumps that come out first before they actually turn into roots, those little bumps are very, 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 very brittle and fragile. So it's important that when you propagating fig tree cuttings and you're changing the water in your containers, and you have to remove your cuttings from your containers in order to change the water and rinse the cuttings off, be sure to rinse your cuttings off with a gentle stream of water first of all, but also be as careful as possible about rubbing the bottom of your cuttings where your roots are beginning to form up against each other, because simply touching these cuttings up against each other when they have the little small tiny little bumps on them that I'll show you guys when I pull these cuttings out from this container, even just touching those little bumps will cause those bumps to break away from your cutting. Only these long roots here are flexible roots. Those little bumps are very, very, very brittle. So we're gonna be careful here, because we still have a bunch of those little small immature bumps on this particular cutting that I'm about to remove from this container. But this South Georgia fig family, if you guys can see that, I'm going to get as close to the camera as I possibly can, is what the root system looks like currently on this particular cutting. As you guys see, we have a tremendous root system that has developed here over the past, it's only been about 3 weeks. And again, these cuttings have been in our refrigerator in the crisper drawer in vacuum sealed packages for about 2 years now. So again, long-term storage, the way things going in this country, vacuum seal yourself some fig tree cuttings. You can always come back, even if you don't have the time or the place to plant them now. You can always come back 2 years later and plant those fig tree cuttings, and they'll actually grow for you. Again, our first Yolo fig tree cutting. Go ahead and get it in this pot here. Again, our little tiny 4-inch container. I'm going to simply place this cutting in the center of this container. Again, this is filtered ground soil from our backyard food forest. There's no fancy process for planting fig tree cuttings. It's not hard. A lot of people think it's very hard to propagate fig tree cuttings. I'm not sure why so many people, contact me and tell me that they have so many issues when it comes to propagating fig tree cuttings. They just don't root, they rot, they die, they disease, and all of that stuff. I have no idea what that's all about. It's a very easy thing here. Most of all, the main thing to remember when you're propagating fig tree cuttings, like a cutting like this, yes, it's fully rooted, but you don't want to drown this thing with water. I always start when you potting propagated cuttings, especially fig tree cuttings, with moist soil. If you start with moist soil, you don't have to actually water the cutting. All we'll do once we get our cuttings potted up is we'll use this little spray bottle right here, our trusty spray bottle that we always use in all of our videos, to mist the top of that soil. Just wet it down a bit. And we're going to set our fig tree cutting to the side. That's all we're going to do. We're going to set it to the side and move on to the next.
I'm gonna again pop these first 3 Yolo fig tree cuttings in this video. We'll break away. We'll get those second 2 containers of cuttings potted up, and we'll bring you guys back when we begin to pot up our Verdon strawberry fig tree cuttings in that last 2-gallon container over there. This is our second Yolo fig tree cutting that we've been able to successfully propagate in just 3 weeks after 2 years of storage in our refrigerator in the crisper drawer. You guys can see that Yolo. Now look at the roots on this guy. Now these are those little tiny bumps that I was telling you guys about. Those little tiny bumps right there, those things are very, very, very fragile. When you're propagating your fig tree cuttings, be careful when you're changing the water. When you first start seeing these little white bumps, well, those are actually your roots that will eventually grow into long, flexible roots like this. But when they're tiny like that, they're very, very fragile. I can probably just take my finger and just rub that off. You see how fragile that is? You just barely touch those things and they'll rub right off. So be careful when you're propagating your fig tree cuttings and they get to the stage where you have these tiny, tiny, tiny bumps on your fig tree cuttings. I'm going to place this cutting in the center of the container as we did our last cutting. Simply fill in around it with this filtered ground soil from our backyard food forest. Again, no fancy process. You don't have to be a botanist, a scientist, a horticulturist to successfully propagate fig tree cuttings. If you have containers, water, and viable fig tree cuttings, about 3 weeks of time, and not 3 weeks of every day you out here fooling around with these fig tree cuttings, just about 3 weeks of time that you can allow these fig tree cuttings to successfully propagate. We only change our water in our propagation jars about once every 2 to 3 days. We do that to keep fresh water in our containers. We also do that because here in Tifton, Georgia, this time of year, there's a lot of mosquitoes. So if you just got containers sitting around with water in them, trust me when I tell you, you're gonna be breeding mosquitoes. That's our second Yolo fig tree cutting. I'm gonna pot up this last Yolo fig tree cutting. I'm gonna break away from this video, and we'll bring you guys back when we begin to pot up our Verdon strawberry fig tree cuttings. I'm going to bring this last cutting up close to the camera so you guys can see the tremendous root system that has formed on this cutting. Again, after 2 years in cold storage, this is about 3 weeks worth of propagation here in water. Go ahead and get this last Yolo planted here. I'm going to break away and we'll bring you guys back in about 10 minutes once we go through those other containers of fig tree cuttings, see what's ready to be planted and what's not, plant what can indeed be planted at this time, and allow what's not ready to be planted to remain in the containers for another week or so. We're just firming this soil down around this fig tree cutting here in this container, not really pressing it down hard. Any excess soil in this container we'll remove. We're trying to keep our soil down around the lip of this container to that line down there. We won't really want soil up above that line. Take our trusty spray bottle. Moisten this soil down a bit. And sit our third Yolo fig tree to the side over here. At this point, we're going to break away from this video. We're going to go through our other containers, and we'll bring you guys back when we get over there to those Verdon strawberry fig tree cuttings. Hang tight. All right, guys, we're back, and as promised, we're bringing you back along with us as we begin the process of potting our Verdon strawberry fig tree cuttings here, and again, some of those tiny 4-inch containers. This is going to be something tricky, but we got to put them in those containers anyway. They're a little tall to be one of those containers. We're going to put them in those containers anyway. Allow them to stay in those containers for about a week, maybe a week and a half before we transplant them again into 1-gallon containers. Again, I want to bring you guys along for the process of potting however many cuttings in this container is actually ready to be potted. But I will bring you guys along with me right quick, because I removed these, a few of these from this container to show you the tremendous amount of foliage and roots that have grown on these cuttings during the past 3 weeks since we begun this propagation experiment. This is our first Verdon strawberry fig tree cutting. As you can see, it's quite a healthy, thick cutting here. Has a nice root system developed on it. I'll pull out a couple of more of these. Show you guys what we have going on in the way of roots again after just 3 weeks here. And these cuttings again were in our refrigerator in cold storage for the past 2 years. Can you guys see the tremendous amount of roots that have formed on this cutting in the past 3 weeks? Now guys, sure if you guys can see those containers over there to the side over there, but we have about 9 containers that we've already put a bit of soil in. We're going to use those containers to pot our cuttings in. Those two will definitely be potting up. I'm going to lay those to the side here for a second as we pull out a few more of these cuttings. See that? Quite a healthy root going on right there. Look at the rest of those roots down there. So yeah, we will be getting these cuttings planted in those 4-inch containers. At least those of these cuttings that are propagated enough to plant in those containers. This guy I'm not going to plant in a 4-inch container. It's just far too large of a cutting. As you can see, it has a tremendous amount of foliage growing on it, and also a tremendous root system growing on it down there also. So I will not be planting this one in a 4-inch container. Slide that one in this jar over here for a few minutes. Next cutting has a few roots on it. We won't be planting this guy right now. I'll give him a few more weeks. Next cutting, healthy cutting though it may be, has those white bumps I was telling you about. They're very fragile at this point. You definitely don't want to brush up against those or pepper with those too much at this point. Pull this guy out here. You can see it's just beginning to sprout out some roots. Placing that one back in the propagation jar. So our next cutting. It's quite the amount of roots on it. We may give that one another week or so. May just go ahead and get it planted today. This cutting is just beginning to pop out roots there, so we'll definitely be putting that one back into our propagation container. There's a cutting back here somewhere in this back that has a tremendous amount of roots on it. This is one of them. You guys see that? Healthy root system going on there, and healthy foliage system going on as well. Lay that one over here with the ones that we're actually going to definitely plant today. You guys see that? Our next Verdon strawberry fig tree cutting. And look at the roots. Look at the roots. Look at the roots. We will definitely be planting that baby today. This baby here, green South Georgia fig family. This baby here. You guys see how extensive a root system this cutting has grown in just 21 days here at South Georgia Figs. So I think we're going to end up planting a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these Verdon strawberry fig tree cuttings here today. These other cuttings we will place back in this container and allow them another 2 weeks if necessary to continue the propagation process. Now at this point, we're going to break away again. We're going to bore you for the step of potting these fig tree cuttings. You guys know exactly how we go about potting them and what we actually pot them in. So we won't bore you guys for that step. We'll bring you guys back in about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes once we get these 6 Verdon strawberry fig trees potted up. Hang tight.
All right, South Georgia fig family, we're back, and this is the totality of the fig trees that we've been able to successfully propagate to the point where we could get them potted up here on our back porch. We have a total of 3 Yolo fig tree cuttings that are fully rooted and potted in these first 3 containers. We have 1 Smith cutting in this 4th container. We have a total of 5 Verdon strawberry fig tree cuttings in these next 5 containers. This is again about week 3. We will be up potting these fig tree cuttings in about another week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, into 1-gallon containers. And we'll bring you guys back at that point when we up pot these fig tree cuttings and also pot some of the other fig tree cuttings that we currently have in propagating in water on our front porch and on our propagation table. Thanks for watching, and if indeed you currently are watching this video on potting some of the 70 fig tree cuttings that we began propagating about 3 weeks ago right here at South Georgia Figs, or you're not already subscribed to this channel, please indeed take this moment to press the subscribe button beneath this video, the like button beneath this video, and be sure, South Georgia Fig family, be sure to share this video with your friends and family as well. Thanks for watching.